Good evening and welcome to Altos, a weekly news and current affairs program produced by the Catholic News and broadcast on Trinity TV and stay tuned TTT. I'm Neil Parsonlal. Here's a look at this week's top stories. Archbishop Emeritus Robert Rivas urges the Catholic community to speak out on societal ills, including domestic violence, rape, and child abuse. The Emmanuel community says financial incentives are a significant driving force behind the push for transgenderism. $1.1 million needed to repair the statue and the Marian Shrine in Laventille, which was struck by lightning 2 years ago. And later, we speak with General Manager of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Sabrina Maula-Bashk, on growing concerns about domestic violence. And now for our top story. Archbishop Emeritus Robert Rivas has challenged the Roman Catholic faithful to break their silence on domestic violence, which he describes as a dark world of terror and battering. Delivering the homily at the closing Mass of the 22nd edition of Jesus' Explosion last Sunday, Archbishop Rivas encouraged women caught in the cycle of domestic violence to walk away from abusive relationships and marriages. Roger Sant has more in this report.
The theme of this year's Jesus Explosion was Walk as Children of the Light, and as he delivered the homily at the closing Mass, Archbishop Emeritus Robert Rivas said he had been guided by the Holy Spirit to speak on the issue of darkness and light. As people of light, he said, voices need to be raised against the many ills plaguing society, not least of which domestic violence.
If you are a Jesus Explosion culture, then you need to truly explode and break the silence of domestic violence, which is part of a dark world of terror and battering.
Acknowledging that domestic violence affects all genders, Archbishop Rivas expressed concern that women and children in particular continue to be victims suffering at the hands of violent perpetrators. Declaring that there are some things that families may have stifled in the past, he said that this must not be allowed to continue.
Domestic violence is violence against the entire family. Domestic violence is dehumanizing, disrespectful of human dignity, and causes great harm and hurt to its victims. Violence in any form, physical, sexual, psychological, or verbal, is sinful. Often it's a crime as well. It should never be condoned or tolerated.
Concerned about the growing scourge, he said the AEC, the Antilles Episcopal Conference of Bishops, had written a pastoral letter on domestic violence, calling it a sin, a crime, and a serious social problem that goes against God's law and the teaching of the Church, declaring that we cannot turn a blind eye to domestic violence since it exists in families, the Church, and parishes. Archbishop Rivas advocated that women need to walk away from violent relationships, including abusive marriages.
It needs to be clearly stated that no one should stay in a violent relationship, just as no person should stay in an abusive marriage.
He is recommending that everyone works diligently to break the silence on domestic violence and to help build a culture of peace and non-violence, not just in TNT, but in the region. I'm Roger Sant reporting for Catholic News Altos.
Meantime, Archbishop Rivas also highlighted other major concerns of the bishops of the Antilles Episcopal Conference, the AEC. Archbishop Rivas said the AEC was concerned about the situation since most instances of rape and child sexual abuse remain unreported. He also cited disturbing statistics, saying in 9 Caribbean countries, 48% of the adolescent girls reported forced sexual initiation. Again, he urged an end to silence on, quote, matters of such gravity, end quote.
Do you know that 3 of the top 10 recorded rape rates in the world occur in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Jamaica? Do you know that all countries in the Caribbean for which comparable data are available, and this includes Trinidad and Tobago, experienced a rate of rape above the unweighed average of the 102 countries assessed?
Jacqueline Alemany of the Emmanuel community delivered a compelling talk on last weekend's Jesus Explosion. She addressed the controversial and complex issue of transgenderism.
Alemany's presentation delved into how the term gender has evolved from being synonymous with biological sex to encompassing a broader spectrum. She discussed the concept of language engineering, highlighting how changes in terminology can reflect and drive hidden agendas.
They change language in documents, in UN documents. They don't say abortion again. They say reproductive health, rights to reproductive health, and that means rights to abortion.
Alemany emphasized the importance of preserving Trinidad and Tobago's sovereignty and cultural values in the face of external pressures and international aid agreements that may come with strings attached, such as accepting transgender ideologies. She shared some statistics illustrating the harsh reality for many who choose to transition.
People who have undergone cross-sex surgery are over 19 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population. Transgenderism does not solve that emotional feeling.
Alemany highlighted that financial incentives are a significant driving force behind the push for transgenderism.
It costs thousands, upwards of 17,000, 20,000 US to be transitioned.
And she highlighted that in researching the fight for transgender rights, it is crucial to ask, what rights are being denied to transgender individuals in Trinidad?
What rights you need that's different from men and women? None. Ask the question. You have all the rights you need as a man and as a woman.
I am Raymond Sims for Catholic News Altos.
And staying with the Jesus Explosion, visiting Jesus Explosion last weekend was a group of 26 pilgrims from Guyana's interior. For many of them, it was their first experience at an event like Jesus Explosion. And as Roger Sant tells us, their visit was the product of years of evangelization in Guyana.
Front and center at the Jesus Explosion, these 26 pilgrims wearing striking yellow jerseys and from deep in the heart of Guyana sang praise and thanks to God as they participated in the weekend's activities. Coming from Region 1 in Guyana's interior, almost an hour by air from the capital, Georgetown, the group's leader told Altos their visit came after several visits by Father Ian Taylor and the Jesus Explosion team dating back to 2019 to minister to them in Guyana. He said that the experience attending in Trinidad was for some life-changing.
While we were going on the maxi back home and being back to the hotel, they were excited, you know. One were telling me that she think that God is calling her right now to be in the choir.
Their parish is Our Lady of Lourdes, which has 20 communities. Vicky Hernandez said she saw God at work with the pilgrims on the weekend.
I really had a wonderful time, and I also know that everybody that came here had a wonderful time because I really saw God's grace working through people. I saw healing taking place and people were being delivered.
After Jesus Explosion, they stayed on for a week for a camp at Father Ian's parish in New Grant, Tableland. Roger Sant reporting for Catholic News Altos.
From Our Lady of Lourdes in Guyana to Our Lady of Fatima in Laventille. 2 years after being damaged in a lightning strike, the statue at Our Lady of Fatima RC Church and Marian Shrine in Laventille has been taken down for repairs. An estimated $1.1 million price tag has been put on the project, which Altos has been told involves more than just repairing the statue. Laura Pickford-Gordon tells us more in this story.
It took about 2 hours to remove the 98-foot statue and pedestal of Our Lady, which was damaged September 9, 2020, after being struck by lightning. It will be sent for restoration, but there's more to the project than just repairing the statue.
When it's brought back, I have to indicate that it won't be put on the tower because the tower needs to be repaired. There are a lot of leakages on it. Also, the lightning rods for the protection of the statue have to be fixed. And also, the lightning work has to be done up there alongside some construction work, painting and other things.
It is estimated that the entire project will cost $1.1 million. The parish has embarked on a fundraising drive to raise the money, and while donors have been generous, the parish is still very far from their target.
In total, as I speak to you now, we have almost 50-something thousand TT, and we are a long way away from the 1.1 million TT. So we still call on persons of goodwill to support us.
I am Laura Pickford-Gordon for Catholic News, Altos.
The Catholic Church in Dominica has a new leader. Bishop Kendrick Forbes was ordained on Thursday evening to lead the Diocese of Roseau. On Wednesday evening, the bishops of the Antilles Episcopal Conference joined local clergy and faithful for solemn vespers at the National Shrine of Our Lady of La Salette. During the prayers, Apostolic Administrator Archbishop Gabriel Malzer of Castries St. Lucia asked the congregation to pray for their new bishop. He later blessed the new bishop's insignia, his ring, pectoral cross, mitre, and crosier.
Indeed, our duty here is to pray for him and with him, asking God to sustain him in his resolve to serve as shepherd of the Dominican souls and the souls of the Caribbean by extension.
I, Kendrick John Forbes, in assuming the office of bishop, promise that in my words and in my actions, I shall always preserve communion with the Catholic Church. With great care and fidelity, I shall carry out the duties incumbent on me toward the Church, both universal and particular, in which, according to the provisions of the law, I have been called to exercise my service.
Almighty and eternal God, bless these symbols for pastoral office and pontifical dignity. May those who use them receive the reward of his faithfulness to enter into eternal life with Christ the High Priest and Good Shepherd, who lives and reigns forever and ever.
And we congratulate the new bishop. We will have more on the Episcopal ordination itself in our next episode. Last week we spoke with a personal safety trainer, and we have this small tip for you on how you could do more about your personal safety. Here's a look.
Good day, Trinidad and Tobago. You may ask yourself, how can I increase my awareness of potential threats in my surroundings? Practice situational awareness by staying alert and paying attention to your environment. Avoid distractions like mobile phones and earbuds, especially in unfamiliar areas. Regularly scan your environment and your surroundings. Take notes of exits, people, and any unusual activity. Remember, Professor O says so.
We thank him for that tip. It's now time for us to take a short break, and when we come back from the break, we talk with Sabrina Maulabashk of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Before we go, here's a look at this week's trivia question. Thanks very much for staying with us. The Coalition Against Domestic Violence is perhaps the oldest NGO in the country that deals specifically with domestic violence issues. We're happy to have with us today Sabrina Maulabashk, who is the General Manager of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. She has been with the coalition for the past 6 years, but has been addressing the issue of domestic violence for about 25 years, Sabrina. Is that so?
That is really so. Yes, indeed. It's been a long time.
A long time laboring in the fields. Sabrina, tell us what exactly constitutes domestic violence, and is there a difference between that and intimate partner violence?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. And so domestic violence is a pattern of harmful behavior perpetrated by one partner against another partner. And of course, the other partner I'm talking about relates to the partner who that perpetrator is in an intimate relationship with. And so it can happen by a perpetrator against a spouse, those living in a common law relationship, in a visiting relationship, even persons who are seeing each other romantically or any type of romantic unions. Once violence is perpetrated against that partner in that intimate relationship, it's referred to as domestic violence. But it can be, alternatively used as intimate partner violence simply because, the violence can occur between two partners who may be in an off-and-on relationship, which may not be construed as a relationship under the law. So that's the difference when the violence occurs, mainly in between and amongst persons in a household. That is where it's different.
That's right.
And so another definition of domestic violence has to do with any violence perpetrated against those living in a household. So other elements of domestic violence has to do with elder abuse and the child abuse, which all constitutes domestic violence. And even if there are persons like grandmothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, and so on living in a household, if violence is perpetrated against any of them, it's referred to and known as domestic violence.
And that was the foundation for the question, because the recent amendments to the legislation spoke precisely to that it widened the scope to now include persons other than the two partners involved in the relationship. Yes, but yes. Sabrina, you have been involved in this for 25 years, and with the coalition for 6 years. Have you seen any shifts in terms of the profiles of victims, the profiles of perpetrators, who's getting involved, who are what's happening in that sphere?
Fundamentally, there are no shifts. There may be shifts in the type of violence that's being utilized and by perpetrators, but fundamentally, it remains the same in that the violence is used for the root cause, that is, the sole purpose of the violence in this kind of domestic violence and intimate partner violence is to exercise and maintain power and control in the relationship. And that's the root cause. We often hear about people say, well, the person was under the influence of drugs or may have been stressed or other reasons offered. But those may be what we refer to the triggers. They are not the root cause of the violence. And of course, the root cause of the violence is deeply rooted in patriarchal norms and systems in which we still, by and large, believe and accept that roles between men and women are based on our understandings of what constitutes man and manhood and woman and womanhood. And so based on those roles and what we've been taught and socialized into thinking and believing those roles to be, which privileges men for the most part and places a lower value to women, there exists what we call unequal power relations between the two, especially in an intimate setting.
But Sabrina, in terms of the domestic violence and even intimate partner violence, have you seen any shift in terms of the numbers? Because we often think of domestic violence as only affecting women. Are we seeing more men coming forward and saying, I have been abused?
Yes, so we have been in recent times, I would say in the last 2 years, at the CDV, we have been seeing more men coming forward. But I think that requires some explanation. And of course, it must not at all take away from the fact that the majority of reports that we receive and those seeking help are women.
In fact,
so
women.
I would say, over 80% of those are women. And we have been seeing men, and of course, in lower numbers, but the men come forward with mainly verbal abuse, emotional abuse, not so much the physical abuse. And when they do come to us, they come at a time when the partner is threatening to exit the relationship. So they see it as a mechanism for keeping the partner in the relationship, in that, because the partner wants to leave, I will try to to do whatever remedial work I need to do in order to get the partner
in order
to
to maintain the relationship.
Yes, not as a means of saying, well, I have a problem, I need to fix the problem for me, but I need to fix the problem as a way of keeping the family intact and keeping the partner in the relationship.
And in that case, Sabrina, then what are the signs we should look for? What are the red flags that people can spot that would identify a potential abuser?
Right. So there are several. There might be 15 and over, but I just like to identify the common ones. So if you are involved in an intimate partner relationship, and I want to clarify that when we speak about perpetrator, and victim/survivor, we know that either could be male or female. So I want to underscore that, because there is a tendency for people to think we are speaking to women only, and when we say perpetrator, we mean men. We mean both men and women, or anyone who exercises and who exhibits and the violence in the relation and demonstrates the violence in the relationship. So sometimes the red flags come up even when persons are dating, and they do not see it. And so any signs of your partner embarrassing you and putting you down and just questioning your self-worth, that's one of the first red flags you need to look out for. Controlling who you see, where you go, what you do, or even what you wear. That's another red flag we like to identify. Preventing you or discouraging you from seeing your family or your friends, wanting to spend all of the time with you, and wanting alone time with you, and cutting off your support networks, friends or family. That's another red flag. Preventing you from making your own decisions, even saying things, if there are children in the relationship, you're a bad parent, and doing things like, threatening to take away the children if there is a conflict between, the partners. Destroying your property, or even including your pets. Intimidating you or threatening you with weapons. Threatening to commit suicide. If you leave me, I do not know what I will do without you. I'll commit suicide because I cannot live without you. That's a huge red flag. Pressuring you to have sex or to engage in sexual activities that you're not comfortable with. Preventing you from using birth control. Does not want you to pursue education or even have a job, saying that I am your partner now, I will provide for you. Stalking you on social media accounts. Checking your phones, listening to conversations you are having, wanting to know who you're talking to, why you are staying so long on the telephone, calling in the workplace to speak to you, but not calling on the cell phone, calling on the landline. So I have identified about 12 or 13 red flags, but there's more.
Those are huge red flags, which then begs the question. But two questions really. Why? One, why do women stay, or why do victims stay in those abusive relationships? And the second part of that question is, having left the relationship, why are women returning? We've just seen a recent murder of someone who left a safe house and went back into an abusive relationship. So one, why do they stay? And two, having left, why do they return?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And it's one that we all struggle with. And because when we're dealing with victims, we have to understand that what we refer to as the victim's psyche. in order to be able to continue to provide the support that victims need. I want to say that the first thing in dealing with victims, we ought to, and no matter who we are, whether we are psychologists, counselors, family, friends, religious leaders, and so on, we must not adopt a judgmental attitude with victims. And so there is always a tendency to victim blame and victim shame. Why did she go back? Why did she leave the safe house? Why did she not leave with the children? So all kinds of questions around victim blaming and shaming, and not enough about perpetrator accountability. So there needs to be some shift in that. But let's go back now to why persons stay in abusive relationships. And so in many instances, we refer to this as having an understanding that abuse is normal. So there is normalization of the abuse. So I've grown up in that family situation. I've grown up in a family. I've grown up in a community where men always beat their wives. It's normal for people to do that. We still go to communities, and here they beat me because they love me. And that's an expression of love. Mm-hmm. And so it's about victims having the perception that this is normal in relationships. And so that's one reason. And then, believe it or not, victims really love the perpetrators, and they want the relationship to work because that's their ideal. The ideal that we've learned is that we need to have a family, we need to maintain and keep the family together, and so victims keep believing I can help that person to change, and so it's around wanting to maintain this ideal of the family, and there is love involved as well. The victims really do love the perpetrators.
Sabrina, it's that time when we have to wrap up. How do people get in touch with the coalition? If someone is a victim, yes, how do they get in touch with you all?
Yes, so we are located at 1 Robinsonville in Belmont, and so you can reach us via email at cadvtt@gmail.com. Or you can call our telephone lines. The most used telephone line is 624-0402. You can also reach out to us via our Facebook page, TNT Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And so I urge all of you who may be listening, reach out to us. We are here to support. Do not stay silent about the abuse. 1 in every 3 women have reported experiencing at least one form of violence in Trinidad and Tobago. 1 in every 3 stay silent. The first step to getting help is to disclosing the abuse. And there is nothing normal about experiencing this abuse.
Sabrina,
so please,
Sabrina, we want to thank you. We want to thank you very much and thank the coalition for the work that you have been doing and the coalition has been doing with domestic violence. I'm sure we'll get an opportunity to speak to you again. Thanks very much.
You're most welcome.
Thanks very much for staying with us. We'll be right back. Catholic News editor Raymond Sims gives us a preview of what's in this week's edition of the Catholic News.
In this week's issue of Catholic News, columnist Daniel Francis examines the use of faith to change our life rather than justify it. And in the God at Work supplement, read about how to ensure as a young person that your personal professional brand is on point. I am Raymond Sims, editor of the Catholic News.
It's the July-August holidays, and what better way to have fun than to have some fun with your own family? The Archdiocesan Family Life Commission, in collaboration with the Office of Youth Ministry, hosted their scavenger hunt on July 6th. The theme, Family, a School of Love. As we end this week's episode, here's a bit of the activity. Have a good week, everyone, and have a happy Emancipation Day as well on Thursday.
I thought you were so gullible.
Long time we have felt like this. So much fun.